Imprint is Houston's premier literary arts organization, and the 2024-25 Imprint Margaret Root Brown Reading Series has been a big hit already, and it's still going on. Join them on Monday, December 2nd for a conversation with best-selling author Rachel Kushner. She'll talk about her new spy thriller Creation Lake, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. Tickets are only $5 and you can get them right now at imprint.org. And as always, it's free for students and seniors. Today on CityCast Houston. Thanksgiving is a time of celebration and family, but for our Indigenous community, it's a day of reflection or even mourning. Maaliyah Papillion is a council member of the Atakapa-Ishak Nation, and she's joining me to give us a history lesson on some of our region's earliest residents, also about the challenges that her tribe currently faces and what her tribe is doing now to make sure their heritage and people are never forgotten. It's Monday, November 25th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Maaliyah, welcome into CityCast Houston. How are you this morning?
Thank you so much. I'm doing really great. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yeah, likewise. I'm excited to talk to you. And of course, right now, we all call this area Houston or H-Town, right? But your
Right.
ancestors had another name for it. What was that, and where did it come from?
Right. So I'm Atakapa-Ishak, and our Ishak relatives and ancestors have been in Texas for since prehistoric times, especially in the Houston area and the Galveston area. And so originally this place was called Bear Creek Town. And in our language, Ishakoi, you pronounce it Shakotel Isho Young. And so that means the place of the bears by the creek. And that's also something that we still refer to as Houston. And so I think it's really cool that we can reintroduce that original name for the city. It's very common that a lot of cities were named off of things that were significant to that land by the indigenous people. And so Houston was the Bear Creek town.
And that term is still used, by the way. Bear Creek Park is still around. There's still area, right?
Right,
Bear Creek is still there. I did not
right.
know that. I just thought it
Yes.
was one of those things that was just part of the Houston culture, right? Like, oh, that's
hmm
Bear Creek Park. And
Yeah.
we don't know why. And I had no idea that there were bears in this area as well.
Yes, there were bears, exactly.
That is so fascinating. Tell me more about your people. Tell me more about the Eshak.
As I mentioned, the Ishak people have been around since prehistoric times in Southwest Louisiana and Southeast Texas, and we still live in these areas. Initially, contact with Europeans happened in 1528 when we rescued a shipwrecked Cabeza de Vaca, which was an early explorer and historian of Texas around Galveston Bay. And so, as mentioned, we're still in these areas. I feel like the common misconception with indigenous people is that we're extinct and we're just kind of in the history books, but we definitely are still alive and well in this area.
So when you were growing up and you were learning about your history and your people, what was one takeaway or something that you remember that even you were fascinated with?
That is a really good question. I think that Louisiana history, where I grew up in Lake Charles, especially when it comes to Native American history, is very diluted. We only learn a fragment of what actually occurred. And so it wasn't until I began studying as an adult and even learning from my family. My great uncle is the chief of our tribe. My dad is our Yukiti Upshok. In our language, that means our medicine man. And so they have taught me our true history, but it's not something I learned in school. In fact, when my dad was in school, he learned that the Ishak were extinct. And I think if you go on Wikipedia today, it says the Ishak are extinct, but I'm not a ghost. I'm talking to you right now. I'm definitely
Wow.
not extinct. And so it's really interesting, and that's characteristic of the history of a lot of tribes, especially smaller tribes are what we would call petite nations. For in our case, who aren't federally recognized, you tend to hear that they are extinct. These people don't exist. But again, we are here, and we've always been here.
I learned about other tribes when I was
Yeah,
in the public school system. Why didn't we learn more about our local indigenous history in school? Why do you think that is?
I think one of the reasons is a lot of the history that has been told or created about Indigenous people, A, has been inaccurate from this area. For instance, we're commonly known as the Atakapa-Ishak, but we called ourselves the Ishak. Atakapa, that word came from a Choctaw word, which means man eater. And so that was to describe the practice of forcibly adopting someone into the tribe. It didn't actually describe cannibalism. And so I know that the Atakapa are largely known as cannibals, and that goes for a lot of indigenous tribes that were referred to as savages, or all of these things that didn't actually occur. And so I think, yeah, I think one of the reasons that perhaps, of course, I'm not in education, but I think perhaps some of the information hadn't been taught is because it's not accurate. And I wish I had a better answer for why it's not been taught. I think that a lot of what we're doing, especially like with having these conversations, is seeking to add that educational aspect into the general public of what you may have not been taught in schools.
How many members of the tribe are around right now? How big is the tribe?
Spanning from Southeast Texas to Southwest Louisiana, about 1,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
How often do y'all get a chance to meet everybody?
We do one big gathering once a year in Louisiana in Lafayette at Vermilionville, which is a
Mhm.
historic village of the Eshak. They have a big Native American Heritage Day every November. And so we gather there. And from time to time, we do other things like powwows and ceremonial gatherings. And we're certainly starting to do more of those, especially post some of the hurricanes that have happened in the past couple of years.
That's so beautiful. One more thing. What does it mean for the tribe to be federally recognized?
So, federal recognition is very characteristic of some of the tribes that are well known in the United States, for instance, like the Choctaw Nation or the Chickasaw Nation. And so, federal recognition means that these tribes have a government to government relationship with our country. And so the tribe would be a sovereign nation. And so with that status comes a lot of protections for the tribe. And in our case, and in other cases for tribes who don't have federal recognition, especially those who have mixed heritage like us, it can be a little bit harder to quote unquote prove that you are who you say you are in the government's eyes. Of course, it's not hard for us to prove because we know
Yeah.
who we are. And so that's a lot of the reasons why, we've been advocating for our federal recognition, especially in Louisiana because of slavery and the slave trade, where indigenous people, Ishak people, were enslaved along with Africans in Louisiana. That caused the mixing of the two groups, but it also caused solidarity within the African and the Black community and indigenous communities that still are around today. And so we don't think that it's a bad thing that our cultures have merged. And I think that our voice and our idea behind it is that we should be recognized because the Ishak is one of the oldest tribes in Louisiana and Texas with scientific proof.
What's the holdup? Why can't y'all get recognized?
I think in general, the legal landscape around recognition is just very slow in the United States. I think that there's many factors, but in general, I think that the process is just very slow.
Last year, we spoke with a member of the Karankawa tribe, and in that interview, we learned about how tribes were pushed out of their land and forced to assimilate. What was the history with the Ishak people in terms of being forced out and to assimilate?
That is a very good question. I think that our history reflects a lot of other tribes in this area of being forced to leave and also being inflicted with disease that was brought by first contact during that time. And so it's a really complicated and very painful history to discuss, but I think the important part to focus on is the resilience within our groups
Yeah.
that even though that was the case, that we're still here. And so that's what we try to always remind people is that we weren't exterminated, we're not extinct.
And that's the frustrating part, right? Where even as somebody like me, I grew up in the city and I'm familiar with so much history, and I'm just now learning about your tribe and your people. And I'm frustrated with that. I can't even imagine what you're going through where you want more people to know and let people know that we are not only part of this land, but that we are still around.
Yeah, it is a lot of different layers to it. And, luckily we do have each other. You know, we have our community
Yeah.
and we have allies within other tribes that help us to continue to preserve our culture and our heritage. And internally within the tribe, for instance, we are experiencing a language revitalization of
Oh,
our
wow.
language Ishikoi. And so at one time, the language was considered dormant. And over the past 10 years, we've had at least 10 language speakers within our tribe emerge. We have a number of publications in our language. We have a documentary in our language. We have two dictionaries and more coming out every year. And so that's just one of the ways that we put our energy of frustration into what can we do now. You know, it's one thing to be frustrated, but I think that that's some very like good energy to use to make a
Hmm.
change, and that's what we're focusing on.
Preserving language sounds like one of the most resilient acts out there. What else are your people doing to show that, look, we are here? Not only that, but we're resilient.
Right. So again, with the publications that we have, some of the things that we're publishing in media, we actually do have a documentary out about us right now that I directed. It's called Ishak. It just made its world premiere at the New Orleans Film Festival. We got a special jury mention award, the audience award, and so that chronicles our history through time. It also has our language in it, and it also depicts our fight for recognition and our efforts for recognition. And so things like that. We get creative
Yeah,
with it. That's just a really creative way of using film and media to progress our
absolutely.
needs. And so, yeah, I think we just keep coming up with creative ways to continue to preserve in any means.
Where can our audience watch it?
Right, so we're making the festival run now. It will be available online sometime soon. And we have another premiere this weekend at the Southern Screen Film Festival in Lafayette. So
Yeah.
I'll definitely give you the lowdown on the screenings for the future.
I would love to be part of one of the screenings if you're in Houston, okay? I'm
Yes.
I'm inviting
Okay.
myself in, Maria.
Okay. Yes. You're invited. You're invited.
Tell me about learning the language. It was dormant, but in the last 10 years,
Correct.
more members have come forward and started talking it.
Correct.
Like, when do you learn it? Are you taking classes? I mean, that's hard to learn a new language.
Yeah, it is hard to learn, and we definitely it's not one of those things where you can just kind of read it independently and
Hmm.
know how to say it because the pronunciations are unlike English or any other language. But
Yeah.
Ishikoi is actually a language isolate, which means it's the only language of its kind, and so this is the last surviving type of this language, this that we speak. And so we needed the help of a linguist. David Kaufman was really instrumental in helping us with the pronunciations and the formations of the language. Also, Dr. Jerry Darensberg. And so we do have intertribal practice sessions where we get together and
Wow.
kind of, you know, choose a topic and we practice our pronunciation, practice our sentence making, and just kind of talk to each other in the way that we can. And that's what we're doing for now.
Do you feel more connected to your ancestors?
Yes, yes, I definitely feel more connected, and it's really changed the way that I view certain things. For instance, the concept of time in Ishikoi, as it's described, is not linear like we know it today. The concept is that the past is in front of you and the future is behind you. And I think it kind of goes to the saying of like history repeating itself, that what we commonly know in the English term. And so things like that kind of like change my mind and um, just get me to accept like a different perspective of maybe
Wow.
like the way my ancestors were thinking at one time.
Is there a saying or a phrase or a poem or a line that you learned that sticks out to you that you want to share with us?
Mm, thank you for asking that. I really like Nenau Shlosh, and that means Earth help us. And I feel like, especially now with everything going on in the world, not only environmentally and politically, we're looking for not only connection and community, but also help from natural resources. And so, Earth help us, Nenau Shlosh always sticks with me. Haktiwe means we are together. I think that's a really important principle
Such an important one.
to realize and remember, you know, because there is an illusion that we're all separated and we're in these isolates, but we really all are together. And I think that if we can remember that, we can make strides for like a greater environment for everybody.
That is so beautiful. brush off your bowlers and prepare your petticoats because the Galveston Historical Foundation is excited to present the 51st annual Dickens on the Strand from December 6th through the 8th. This holiday tradition has a ton of great family activities, live entertainment, special events, and more. Dickens on the Strand is based on 19th century Victorian London and features parades, non-stop entertainment on 6 stages, street performers, and more. One of my favorite things is seeing vendors in period costumes peddling their wares from street stalls and pushing carts full of holiday treats and drinks. Plus, there's Victorian-inspired crafts, clothing, jewelry, holiday decorations, and gifts. This year's festival welcomes 3 special visitors who are descendants of Charles Dickens, Queen Victoria, and Prince Albert. Plus, the Dickens Town Crier and event namesake Charles Dickens himself will be walking around. Tickets, maps, and more are available at dickensonthestrand.com. Get ready to experience the holiday season like never before in the heart of downtown Houston. This year, downtown transforms into a festive wonderland with 12 unique holiday villages, each brimming with its own special activities to make your season truly merry. From the biggest mistletoe in Texas to delightful pet portraits with Santa, that's where we're going to take our dog for pictures. You also have ice skating, lively silent discos, and so much more. To make exploring even easier, hop on the double-decker holiday bus for a nominal fee and enjoy a magical open-air tour of the city's holiday villages. Downtown Houston is your one-stop holiday destination. Learn more about the 12 holiday villages and plan your adventure at downtownhouston.org/holidays. Get energized and revive this holiday season in downtown Houston. Maaliyah, one thing that I learned as I was preparing for our conversation was that Harris County has the 4th largest indigenous population in the entire country. And that's according to the 2023 census data. And it's really impressive that the indigenous people here in Houston are so diverse and they represent so many different tribes. There's one estimate that there are 70,000 indigenous people living in the greater Houston area.
Wow.
What does that number mean to you?
Wow. Thank you for sharing that with me. This is the first time I'm hearing of this. That really makes me so excited because it just, again, ties into what we're saying of through all that we have been through, how we continue to persevere and self-preserve ourselves. And I think that information like that is extremely useful and accurate, again, for the educational aspect of it to show that we're not going anywhere, and there's ways in which that we've chosen to continue to survive.
The other side of that is, despite these high numbers, we
Yeah,
don't have a lot of cultural services or representation
correct,
here either. Why
correct.
do you think that is?
Hmm. Again, I think it's layered. I think on because I have been working and talking to some um local political figures, congressmen, especially in Louisiana and Texas, about how we can kind of bypass for our tribe not having federal recognition, not having that federal funding to support some of these cultural initiatives, not only for ourselves, but for neighboring indigenous groups. What I found, it really comes down to money and budgeting. And
Mm.
so it's like that is a factor. And so it's like, okay, how can we continue to band together and get what we need, even if these local government entities don't have the budget or something like that. And so I think it's just an ongoing question and something that,
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting creative to solve, but that's what I've gathered.
All right, Maaliyah, Thanksgiving is this week, and I know a lot of Houstonians are excited to eat and spend time with their family members, but I also understand for many, this is a tough week. This is a day of mourning. It represents a lot of devastation for indigenous communities. So for you, what does Thanksgiving mean?
Thanksgiving means a day of reflection to me. I think that, we're all taught the very aspirational and inspiring aspect of how we came to this day, but it really does put a blanket over the true history of why we're all here. And so I think incorporating an aspect of remembering the true history of this day is important. I'm not saying go out and not have your turkey or don't see your friends or don't have fun. I think just in general, remembering and showing reverence for the history and the people that lost their lives because of this event.
When you are reflecting, are you doing it with other members of your tribe? What does your day look like on Thanksgiving?
Well, I think the best way for me to heal is through rest. And so
Yeah.
I will be I will be resting, I
Yes.
will be sleeping. That's always been my go-to for rest and regeneration. But yes, we will be gathering some of us to kind of remember this. And of course there will be food. Of course there will be laughs. There's not going to be tears.
Yeah.
This is still, I think part of acknowledging history and part of acknowledging pain that has happened in the past is alchemizing it and using
Hmm.
it for your joy today. Because being stuck in only the despair and
Yeah.
only the trauma, I feel like can be a bit paralyzing for anybody.
And like that history is important. And we've talked a lot about the history. Let's talk about today. Tell me more about the indigenous communities right now in Houston. What are some traditions that are still thriving in your tribe and also locally that you know of?
Right. So I can speak for our tribe because that's what I know best.
Yeah.
For us, dance is something that is so around for us and that we're never, getting away from. And so the Ishak, every major pioneer in Zydeco music has come off of Ishak territory. So there's
What?
actually a book called The Indians Who Gave You Zydeco, and it's about the Ishak and how the Ishak have influenced Zydeco music as we know it today,
Get
which I
out of
know,
here.
yeah, you
I did
know
not. And for
Zydeco
those who don't know
music.
what Zydeco music is, it's that
Yes,
iconic music from Louisiana.
yes,
I mean, you know it. When you hear it, it's
yes,
that Cajun music.
right.
I did not know that. That is so
Yes,
fascinating.
exactly. And so I would say that's a tradition that still stands, not only in Louisiana, but Texas, especially
Yeah.
in Houston. So, stuff like that for us is important. Of course, there's, food traditions that still stand in our community. And of course, now our language. And so I'm just really excited to see how it continues to evolve into the future.
Give me a food tradition because I love food.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love food. So you got to give me one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously for us, we were people that lived along the water, so seafood is really big for us. Any type of seafood, fish, oysters was really our sustenance. And so, I think the modern application for that came from French Creole influences, like things like gumbo. I think we can all
Yeah.
relate to eating that. And so that definitely is something that is like a modern take on
Oh,
something
wow.
that we used to do. Yeah.
Sign me up. Sign me up. I'm there for that one too.
Yeah.
Malia, tell me more about
Hmm.
current day Eshak,
You're right.
right? We know where they're living, but what are y'all doing? Tell me about some community leaders. Give me some good stories here.
Right, for sure. We have a variety of amazing people within our tribe doing really great works. We have a number of professors, all the way from Calgary to the University of San Diego, Dartmouth. I mentioned Dr. Jeffrey Derensberg, who's doing amazing work with language revitalization and Native American history in Louisiana. I myself am getting my master's of legal studies in Indigenous peoples law from the University of Oklahoma. And so from there, I'll use my knowledge to further progress our tribe and what we need. And so, I mean, we're modern people with jobs, but we're
Yeah.
still we're still making a difference. And so I think that as we continue to progress forward, we are just up to some really exciting things.
I recently learned about the annual Native American powwow that takes place at Traders Village here in the Houston area. And it already happened this year, but it seems like a great way for the public to experience Native American culture, as they called it, right? In Houston. And we actually included it in our November guide on CityCast Houston. Can you talk more about these powwows and what listeners could learn and see there and why they're important?
Right. I think they're really important, powwow specifically, because it gives a place for Indigenous people to gather and not only be in community with each other, but be in community with their surroundings, which was never previously the case. up until recent history, being in a safe environment to practice these dances, these
Mhm.
songs in public and be honored. And I think, again, tying it into the educational aspect of what it means to be Indigenous today, I think it's great for people outside of the community to come and see, how we do live and how we do pay respect to the land and each other in this really cool environment. And so I think that's the main thing, is just giving a safe place for us to be in community with each other and the people around us.
Maaliyah, tell me, what problems are Indigenous people currently facing today?
I think there's quite a few. And I do want to stress that I'm speaking based off of what I've experienced through my experience with in our tribe, the Ishak people. I think there's also the idea that Indigenous people are monoliths and we speak for everyone. I can't say what everyone is feeling because I'm only one person, but I do think in general, there are still high amounts of Indigenous erasure, especially as it pertains to mixed race Indigenous people. For those of us who are Ishak, who are also Black and Creole, we're Afro Indigenous, things like that that don't really get a light in the media or film and education in general. And I think another issue is what we're experiencing in the world in general. Indigenous people make up some of, I think, less than 5% of the world's population, but we steward 80% of natural resources and land. And so the lack of support that we have for doing this, the lack of use of traditional ecological knowledge that would prevent a lot of the things that we're experiencing today as it relates to climate change is definitely a difficult thing to face.
That's a tough one, right? Because there's so much there. And I'm thinking, what could we do as listeners? What can we do as Houstonians, as people of the Southeast Texas region, Louisiana region as well? What can we do to help?
I think the first thing you can do is to first be aware of where you're living if you don't know where you're living. As it relates to the land that you're on, research who was there, and we have the internet, so it shouldn't be too hard for you to find who
Agreed.
was there and find out who's still there. You mentioned the Karankawa. They do a lot of great work in Houston, and I know that they could use a lot of support and uplifting. Same goes for our tribe. There's always ways you can help progress the collective effort of communities who are still working with the land through donations, through volunteering, through advocating, through extending your network, your resources to help them. I think that there's a lot to do, and a lot that can be done. And I think it's all very manageable.
Last question. What are some other respectful ways for us to learn about your people's culture?
I think the main thing you can try to start doing is at least start to educate yourself first and then come with questions. I wouldn't say to rely too heavily for all of the work to be done outside of yourself. And that's just in general, no matter if it's from whatever community you're approaching. I think just having a basic knowledge of what you're asking or what you're wanting to know, I think having a base start to that is respectful as well.
That's beautiful. Maaliyah, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
educating me on so many different things. I am leaving this interview refreshed and excited about learning about your people and the impact that they've had on things that I enjoy. So I truly
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Awesome. And fuego is thank you in Ishikoi. So fuego, we really appreciate it.
That was Maaliyah Papillion. I've linked more info about her tribe in our show notes, and I'll definitely keep you updated when the documentary on the Ishak is available for viewing. Now, like you, I learned something new today, so please share this episode with the last 3 friends you've texted so they can learn something new as well. You can also drop us a rating and review and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Thanks. And if you want to know the latest events for this holiday week, subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Houston, with the info in our show notes. That will do it for today. I'm Raheel Ramzanali. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new.